What is going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. This is the 18th episode of Season 3. Today, we're going to be talking about a QB deep dive, talking about quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson, and more, and how we see them panning out for fantasy this year. Joining me today to break this all down is a returning guest on the podcast and also the first returning guest of Season 3. He is also a local New Englander like myself, a former fantasy analyst for PFF, now a full-time analyst at FantasyPros, and a co-author of the best-selling fantasy football black book with over 14,000 followers on Twitter. He is Andrew Erickson. Welcome back to the show.
Alex, we made it. We went to the Red Sox game. We conquered. We came, and now we're back. So I'm excited to be on here talking some quarterbacks and just get more into the fantasy football season. This is the nitty-gritty time when the diehards are out, because right now the biggest news is Leonard Fournette. He's fat now.
He's fat.
That's the biggest news right now. So we got to siphon in between, what's real, what's not real, and break down these quarterbacks.
I think it's so funny that happened, especially because I got a DM this morning from one of my best friends, and he sent me the picture. I hadn't seen it of the Leonard Fournette, and he just goes like Eddie Lacy 2.0 question mark. So anytime you're in June of a fantasy football season and you're getting Eddie Lacy references about a running back, that may lower his ADP. Let us take more advantage in best ball or whatever format we're playing right now. So I will buy the dip on Fat Lenny right now. So I just cannot believe that you see stuff like that. Do you think there's any real chance that he's actually just like a little fat right now, or is this like the whole James Harden fat suit incident in the NBA and it's all just completely overblown? Is there any truth to this?
I mean, it's possible. I mean, you're in the off season, so you're not, trying to let your body heal. Like, you're not out there, you're grinding and trying to come in as, I need to be this sculpted player. Like, I mean, football is such a unique game where you need to be healthy for a certain amount of time. And really, it's probably in your best interest is to relax during your off time and not, like, you're just trying to get through the season. There's a point where you're a veteran player and it's like, you can't, like, is Leonard Fournette supposed to get in better shape? At this point in his career, like, no, like, he wants to peak when the season starts. So look, man, he bulked up a little bit, ate some ice cream, he's good to go, man. I have no, so obviously he's going to look worse than like the rookies that are coming in who have been, nonstop training with the combine. So yeah, of course he's not going to look like those guys, but when the pads are on and that's what actually matters, and he's got Tom Brady's trust. So I think that if his ADP actually dips because of this photo, I'm taking advantage of that.
100%. And I think the other part of it also with stuff like this is like, I mean, I was one of the people that bought into Mike Davis's quads last year. Like, I saw the big quads, and all of a sudden I started drafting him more because I was like, oh, this guy's ready to take the mother load at running back this year. But that's just fantasy football. That's the beauty of having June and the OTAs photos and stuff like that. I'm all here for it. I love the hype and I love diving into it, but I'm also more excited than all of that to dive into these quarterbacks today. We're going to start with at the top of ADP with quarterbacks and kind of work our way down, giving our thoughts on each quarterback. We have 10 of them today. And we're going to start with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's someone to me, Andrew, that I don't know. He's the QB2 right now in ECR, which is expert consensus rankings on FantasyPros. But that worries me a little bit just because I feel like that, yes, that's a very fair place to put him. But, he doesn't run a lot, averaging just 3.7 rush attempts per game, only 17 rush yards per game. And I just feel like I'd rather swing for the fences on guys that have had really high, like, points per game averages. Like, Lamar Jackson's hit 28 in a season. Kyler Murray's hit 24.5. Josh Allen, 24.5. And I'd rather chase these guys that I feel like they have bigger ceilings that can really run for a lot of yards. But do you think that is Justin Herbert your QB2 right now?
Yeah, Justin Herbert's my quarterback too, and I think it has to go with the variance that you're going to get from him versus some of the rushing quarterbacks. So, look, will Justin Herbert be, the number one quarterback here this year? Maybe, probably not. It's probably going to be one of those rushing quarterbacks like you had mentioned. But when we're talking, okay, like, who is like the best bet besides Josh Allen to be like top 3? Like, Justin Herbert's like definitely in that conversation. So it's one of those where you're kind of paying up for the security of the position, where it kind of reminds me of Adrian Peterson so many years ago at running back, where he was always the RB1, but never actually finished as the RB1. But he was the most locked and loaded guy to finish, top 3 or top 5 at the position, which is why people would take him number 1 overall, even though he would never actually be the number one overall finisher. It would be a rotating cast of whatever running back hit that year. But Peterson brought the consistency, and I think that's what you're getting out of Justin Herbert as the quarterback too. I just don't see any flaws really in his game besides just the rushing. And we've seen at times he does take off and run. But all the weapons he has, they brought Mike Williams back, Keenan Allen. He was fourth in fantasy points per game last year. Dude, the craziest stat about Herbert, because the only way you get a quarterback that can kind of mitigate the loss of the rushing production is passing production. So like he has to be like absolutely bonkers throwing the ball through the air. That's how their offense operates. It's a pass first approach. And Herbert has thrown for 300 plus yards in 53% of his games since entering the NFL. So every other week, Justin Herbert's thrown for 300 yards. So that in itself, like if I'm going to bet on a quarterback to be the crazy passer and lead the NFL in passing yards, it would probably be Justin Herbert. So that's probably the guy, especially playing in that loaded AFC West, shootout after shootout. I know they've made improvements on defense, but we can look at defenses and say, oh, this is going to be a shutdown defense. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the case. I think they're going to have to throw, and they're going to have to. I mean, this offense, what they showed us last year, they don't want to stop scoring points. Like they want to be aggressive, go for it on fourth down, and that's going to create more opportunities for Justin Herbert to score fantasy points. So I think that the quarterback 2 ranking is more of a, hey, I just don't see a lot of ways where you draft Herbert and you're like, man, he like busted because he was horrible. It's like, no, dude, he's going to score like 20 fantasy points every single week now. Maybe he doesn't bring the ceiling as much from the rushers, but he's not going to get hurt. He's going to play all 17 games, and he's going to be consistent.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great way to put it. Again, just in the range of outcomes and variance that, Herbert's the guy you want. I think the other part that, also, as much as I was making the case against him, another part that, could be for him is that their offense really hasn't changed. Their only real big, change was their offensive line getting upgraded. They drafted a first-round offensive lineman, and they also, I think, got an upgrade at tight end going from Jared Cook, who's like 38 and a half. I'm kidding. He's like 33 or 34, but they added in Gerald Everett, who's a solid pass catcher. And otherwise, the offense is going to be very condensed with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler. I really like him. And I do like I'm a little worried about him for that reason, like what I mentioned earlier, but I'm more worried about someone like Patrick Mahomes. I think is someone that I'm a little bit more, okay, I would have him farther down, like behind Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, because Patrick Mahomes is the ECR QB3 right now. But he's only played 4 games in his career without Tyreek. And the last 3 years after he finished as the QB1 in 2018, he's been the QB7, QB4, and QB4. And then you lose a weapon like Tyreek. I know that they replaced it with the almighty Juju and MVS and, Sky Moore. And those guys are all, subpar in their own right. Maybe Sky Moore will be great. Let's hope so. But I don't think that, Patrick Mahomes has that same, crazy ceiling that he did when you could throw 25% of his pass attempts to Tyreek that he did last year. That's a lot of passes going to someone like Tyreek that are now to be going to Juju and MVS and some of these guys. And I'm not trying to take shots at some of their pass catchers, but I just feel like his ceiling is a little bit more capped. And maybe, Andrew, it's the same argument you just made with Justin Herbert. Okay, we're looking, the range of outcomes, you're going to bet on a guy as good as Patrick Mahomes every single day. He's your QB3 locked and loaded. That's fine. I'm good with that. Just personally, I'm going to swing for the fences of the guys that I really do feel like can be the QB1 like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray, where I don't really think that Patrick Mahomes is the QB1 overall in his range of outcomes for this year.
No, I agree. I think that Mahomes is overrated in fantasy football. Like
fantasy football.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty obvious, honestly. Losing Tyreek Hill is such a massive loss for him. You look at where they rank in terms of combined passing touchdowns since 2016. They have 41 touchdowns, so trailing only Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. Guys, Patrick Mahomes didn't become the quarterback in Kansas City till 2018. The top tier ceiling games that Mahomes has delivered have almost always been because of Tyreek Hill. Like their combination, when Mahomes has had these bonkers games, it's because Tyreek Hill put up 50 points. Like those games that we all remember where Tyreek Hill just strikes fear into your heart when you see your opponent has Tyreek Hill playing in the late window. You're like, oh my God, I'm up by 50. That's not enough points for me to overcome this Tyreek Hill friggin' explosion that's going to go off in the late window. So I think with Mahomes, you look at Mahomes last year, he had the same fantasy points per game as Herbert. And one of them has clearly got a downgrade in the offseason and one didn't. So I don't get the Mahomes over Herbert debate. I think it's clearly Herbert over Mahomes in fantasy.
Agreed.
And going back to your point where I'm not going to have all my top 5 quarterbacks, as those safer players. It's like I'm going to choose one, and I'm going to pick Herbert as that guy that I know, okay, he's the consistent player that I like in the top 3 that I'm ranking. I mean, Mahomes, I don't even have in my top 5, like for fantasy,
Yep.
because
Wow.
there are guys that I'm looking at that I have more rushing upside here. I see a higher ceiling here, where Mahomes, I'm kind of like, yeah, I get where he's going. I get that he's the real life best quarterback, but this is fantasy football, and like you have to understand the difference between the two things. And sometimes that doesn't always transfer into ADP because he's Patrick Mahomes. Oh, you got to draft Patrick Mahomes. He's the QB1. It took forever for everyone to accept that Josh Allen was the better fantasy quarterback, and I just want to be ahead of the curve. So when
Yep.
Mahomes comes out and is just, he has decent weeks, but not these elite weeks, especially in the beginning of the season when he's trying to gel with all these new pieces. I mean, we saw last year this Chiefs offense looked horrible and they were not in sync whatsoever. Like, I don't think this is just going to be a smooth operating machine with all these new pieces, especially from the beginning. So for me, especially coming with Mahomes last year, coming off career low PFF passing grade, career high in interceptions, he's way overvalued at, I know you mentioned him as QB3 ECR, but he's QB2 in a lot of ADPs. So I think the experts are
Oh,
right about ranking Mahomes at quarterback 3 behind a guy like Herbert. But like I said, I have him much lower where I'm just not going to be drafting Mahomes.
exactly. And again, we're not like people always get confused. They're gonna listen to this and be like, "Oh, like you guys are just crapping on Patrick Mahomes. He's like the best quarterback in the NFL." Like okay, like yes, I understand that, and you might be right, but like we're talking about fantasy football, and we're talking about winning you your $20 home league that you play on ESPN with your friends here. Like Patrick Mahomes overvalued in that league, and I think I'd much rather draft someone like Kyler Murray. I mean, Kyler Murray, Christian Kirk is gone, and DeAndre Hopkins will be out for 6 games, but they also add in Hollywood Brown. They get Zach Ertz for a full season. They get Trey McBride, who I think was the best tight end in this draft. They get the corpse of AJ Green back for maybe a couple touchdowns for this coming year. But Kyler Murray in his 3 seasons has been amazing. I mean, he was the QB7 as a rookie in 2019, the QB2 overall behind only Josh Allen in 2020. And in 2021, he finished as the QB10 because he missed a couple games, but he was still the quarterback 3 in points per game. And the thing that I love about Kyler Murray is that he's steady, with his rushing upside, that he was dealing with some injuries. So his rush yards per game went down last year to 30, but over his career, he's averaging 39 rush yards per game. I mean, like over a quarterback like Tom Brady, like Kyler Murray is literally getting like almost an automatic 4-point head start every single week just from his rushing upside. And that doesn't even include the rushing touchdowns that he's gotten. I think he has 21 rushing touchdowns in his 3 seasons. That's like 7 a year. That's amazing. So Kyler Murray, because of that ceiling that he's had and because of how good and talented that he is, like he's someone that I'm very excited about this year and someone that I feel like is a little undervalued. He is my QB2 right now in fantasy football. Sorry, QB3, excuse me. But I love Kyler Murray. Are you feeling the same way? Do you think that you said that Patrick Mahomes should definitely be below Kyler Murray, correct?
Yeah, that's where I have them ranked. I think Kyler I had, I think, at one point in the offseason at QB2. So I
Okay.
definitely I'm with you there with his upside, and I moved him down a little bit because of what was going on,
Yep,
whether he
of
was going to
course.
play or not. And he has been in OTAs for the Arizona Cardinals. So the thing with him is, and I don't even really care about the Hopkins thing, honestly. Like the first 6 weeks, I think that you should be over buying that discount because
Yep.
we want Kyler running. And when you look at Kyler's splits, first half of the season versus second half of the season, the dude is literally unstoppable in the first half of the season because he's healthy and he's running around. Like if you look at just kind of pulling up his splits here, so 27.8 fantasy points per game as a QB1 and QB3 respectively over the first half of the last 2 seasons, basically before he's gotten hurt. And I think that what you can do with Kyler, I think is an interesting approach with him, is you draft him much later than a lot of these other quarterbacks. You're going to get fringe QB1 overall production. And then by the time, the midweek comes around, you even use the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is coming back as a reason to trade off Kyler Murray. Because I think that at the end of the day, okay, obviously outing Hopkins is good for Kyler Murray, but I don't think it's like quantifiable enough to really move the needle because you just want him rushing. And what we've seen him do over the past couple seasons is the rushing just tails off at the end of the year because he gets banged up. And even adding a guy like DeAndre Hopkins may almost entice him a little bit more. Hey, let's throw the ball, stay in the pocket, don't risk hurting yourself because we want to make a playoff run. So I think that when we talk about trades, during the offseason. I know that, we talked about this on the podcast last year where it's like, hey, you got to buy low on Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
You really got to think ahead. But you do have to think ahead with these. And, it's so obvious with some of these buy low, sell high guys that you can never really get a trade because, everyone knows, like, everyone's going to say Marquise Brown, sell high because DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. Like, it's an article I've already seen. It's going to be written. Like, it's just going to happen. And you're not going to be able to get anything from Marquise Brown because everyone knows that Hopkins is coming back. But I think that you can use Hopkins coming back as a legitimate reason that people will actually buy into as a reason to sell Kyler Murray high because I have no doubt in my mind that Kyler Murray will start the season on fire through the first couple of weeks of the year, even without DeAndre Hopkins in the fold, because I think he's going to be healthy and running. Now, the only thing that I could see potentially being a wrench in this, this evil plot that I've kind of laid out for everyone with drafting Kyler Murray is if he makes a quote unquote executive business decisions like, yeah, no, I'm not running. I need my contract. Like, I want to get paid because I know that's kind of been the rhetoric out of Arizona where he wants to get this long-term contract. And there is a part of me that does fear, like, could he pull back the running based on his own? Like, that's what he's going to do. I don't think that's really wise of him because he's not as good when he doesn't run. Like, he's not effective when he doesn't run. So if he wants to be a good quarterback and win games, I think he has to run. So I don't think that that's something I would really gravitate towards, but something I just kind of keep in the back of my mind when I do the ranking. So I think that's why I have him at QB5, just because of the question marks about maybe how much he does run, but I still want him over Mahomes.
I feel even more confident, though, as you said that, in Kyler Murray, not over just the first half, but over the full season. Because like you said, if we're going to see him explode in the first half, and then you add in DeAndre Hopkins to that offense, I know you said that there could be a reason to sell, but an offense with someone like Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins and Zach Ertz for the full season and someone like Trey McBride maybe coming into his own around halfway, if Kyler can stay healthy, I think he's going to do it. And on the aspect of like the whole, he might not run because he's a contract, I think we've seen with these players, like once they actually get into the season, I mean, these guys are not going to, hold back in a game. They're trying to win games. And I feel like if I'm, the Cardinals, I'm not going to want to pay a guy because he said he's not getting his contract, so he stops running. Like, I don't want to play a player like that. It's not until you pay me, I'm not going to do it on the field. I get the training camp stuff, the holdout, whatever. But like on the field, if they're not giving it their all, like I'm not paying that guy. So I think that Kyler, when he's on the field, I think he's a baller and I think he will ball on the field. But the other guy that I think is going to ball, Andrew, this year is one of my guys last year in Jalen Hurts. The longer this offseason's gone on, the more I'm buying into Jalen Hurts even more, especially because the fact that, again, for one, he was the QB1 overall in fantasy for the first 11 weeks of the season before having a highly sprained ankle in week 12, QB8 on last season, QB7 in points per game. But here's the biggest thing about Jalen Hurts is his target leaders were last year were Devontae Smith with 114, Dallas Goedert with 88, Quez Watkins was the third target getter with 69, and Jalen Reagor was fourth in targets with 60. And then you add in someone like A.J. Brown. I mean, this it can't get any worse with what they had last year for the guys that were getting targets. You add in A.J. Brown, but not only A.J. Brown, but Devontae Smith in the second year. He had a good rookie year where he had to be the X wide receiver. And now A.J. Brown comes in to take coverage off of Devontae Smith. And then Devontae Smith is also going into his second year will improve. And then the other part of where Jalen Hurts is going to his third year. He improved from year 1 to year 2. What is he going to do from year 2 to year 3? He's going to improve. And then you add in A.J. Brown in the second year of Devontae Smith. And Dallas Goedert's also going to his third or fourth year now. Like everyone in this offense is ascending. The coaching is going to ascend. Now that the play calling will be different. I'm all in on Jalen Hurts. I think he's a top 5 QB.
Top 5's not high enough. Top 3. I got him a quarterback 3. Like,
really?
Dude, all the reasons you hit on him are just like you can't be high enough. You can't be high enough on Jalen Hurts. And I think the best part of it is like you don't have to draft him as the quarterback 3. Like he's not going to be the quarterback 3 off the board. Look, round 6 is kind of where I've kind of pegged him.
That's where he was going last year.
Yeah, right. But that's why it's just a screaming buy and such an easy target. Even when you look at just his schedule, to open the season: Lions, Vikings, Washington, Jacksonville, Arizona. For first 5 weeks, and then he gets Dallas. It's just like he's so set up to smash all over the place. 85% of his games that he's played a full 4 quarters in, QB1, top 12 quarterback. So not only are you getting the floor from Jalen Hurts every single week, you now have an even higher ceiling with AJ Brown now in the fold. Devontae Smith, like you mentioned, entering year 2. I mean, if this had just been like an average quarterback, we would be looking at this guy as, oh my God, like this guy's got a lot of good weapons and this Eagles offense that we could potentially see throw the ball more. Look, last year, weeks 1 through 6, Eagles had the second highest pass play rate on neutral in a neutral game environment. So basically, when they weren't like trailing, it wasn't like 2 minutes left in each half. Basically, what the team wanted to tell us what they were doing, they wanted to be pass heavy. Now they obviously changed their approach down the stretch, and they ended up being a run heavy team. And that still exists, but that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't nuke Hurts' value because he's a rushing quarterback. So I think Hurts, man, like you just can't rank him high enough. Like I said, I have him at quarterback 3. He has the number 1 player in my Andrew Erickson's Players to Target article that came out here as we record on June 7th. Because Jalen Hurts is like, when I talk to my buddies and friends, like, hey, Andrew, like, who do I draft this year? Off the cuff, it's like Jalen Hurts, Courtland Sutton. Like those are the guys I just like list off because I know I've done enough research. I don't need to list off the facts because I just know like these are the players I want because I've done all the research on these players, and I just think that Hurts, like you said, dude, it's just he's your guy. Like he's my guy too. He's our guy.
Our guy. I love that. Well, okay, here's something to add with Jalen Hurts. And people, before I'm going to say this, and you're going to want to throw your phone or something, but just hear me out for a second. Jalen Hurts could be what Josh Allen was in the year that he took off. For this reason, that Josh Allen was already a like lower end QB1 like the year before. He was being drafted in the same area after Stephon Diggs because they were like, this guy can't pass. I don't care if Stephon Diggs gets added. And then we undervalued him because we thought this guy can't throw. And then when you all of a sudden you add in one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and he just explodes. Jalen Hurts could do the exact same thing. We're drafting him in the same place that he was last year after adding AJ Brown because people are like, oh, we just don't really like think that he's going to be that great of a passer. It's the same thing with Josh Allen where he's already doing it with his legs. Jalen Hurts was already the quarterback 1 in fantasy football for like 66% of last season. And then you add in, AJ Brown, and we're drafting him in the same place. Like he could legitimately be what Josh Allen was. I'm not saying it's like likely, but it's a very similar situation where people are still fading him after they added one of the biggest talents.
Yeah, and that's why he's attainable. Like that's why you can get him, and that's why you could have got Josh Allen. Like you should give some credit to quarterbacks that while they develop as a passer, figure it out as a rusher. Like it's not. It's like you shouldn't be like knocked on him. He's like, well, the only reason he does anything is because he runs, and then but that's part of his game. Like that's why he's a dynamic player. Do you think if he was a statue back there, he wouldn't be the Eagles quarterback anymore? Having a rushing ability gives you time because teams know you're not a sitting duck out there. So it's like, all right, okay, I didn't make the right read when I dropped back, did my 7-step drop. Okay, I had to run around and make a play. Okay, Josh Rosen couldn't do that. And that's why Josh Rosen is no longer in the NFL, or he's like buried on some depth chart somewhere. Someone's got to fact check what team Josh Rosen is on. But yeah, I think that you're super accurate with that take with Josh Allen. And it's like people were afraid to buy in because they were concerned about his real life passing when it's like, again, this is fantasy football. And all Jalen Hurts has done is shown that he's a dynamite fantasy football asset and he's in the best situation he could possibly have. And the fact that you point out that he's going in the exact same position he was last year, just, dude, all in.
It's crazy. But here's the thing. Okay, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts were both 52% completion percentage their second year. I mean, their first year. Josh Allen in his second year was at 58%. Jalen Hurts last year with throwing to those guys was at 61%. So, like, could Jalen Hurts make that same jump to 69% like Josh Allen did in his third year? I think it's possible. Is it likely? No, but the thing is, this is in the range of outcomes. And when you can get a guy in there that has that clear range of outcomes, when he outproduced last year and is going in the same place, buy it all day. We can move on from Jalen Hurts, and we've talked about him a lot. But the point is, Andrew's guy, my guy, our guy, doesn't matter. Draft Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
If you don't believe me, believe Andrew. You don't believe Andrew, believe me. Either way, draft Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
Next guy we want to talk about, not as exciting as the guy we just talked about. I won't say his name again for the people. I'm sorry. Is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson right now is someone that, people are a little unsure about because, he's been a QB9 or better in 8 out of the last 9 seasons, but his worst season was last year at QB16. He had a career low 13 rushing yards per game. He's had at least 21 rush yards per game in every other season. And now we're going into his age 34 season. And, I love Russell Wilson. You love Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is still a fantastic quarterback, but we're starting to see the production with the legs go down. And, he is 34. And, Russell Wilson is still a really great quarterback right now, but does he really have that same ceiling now that he's 34? He's with your guy, Cortland Sutton. I think it's going to improve Cortland Sutton massively. But I'll leave it to you here. How do you see Russell Wilson panning out this year? What is your outlook for him?
I think that the ideal scenario is kind of like Stafford was last year.
Yeah.
So kind of someone that is a back end quarterback one, just because he has good weapons around him. He's in a good environment, and we know Russ is still good. Like before his injury last year, he was top of the leagues in terms of passer rating from a clean pocket. Like the injury really played a toll on his statistics and how poor he basically performed. And really, like his season was kind of just what he usually does. Like he's always been this kind of like roller coaster kind of quarterback where, hashtag better in best ball, basically a quarterback that, 23 fantasy points per game from weeks 1 through 4 in weeks 16 through 18. And then you look at the 6 games post his injury coming back, he averaged 13 fantasy points per game. So like half the season he was a like top 6 quarterback, top 7 quarterback. And then the other times he was like borderline unplayable. And this is not anything new with Russell Wilson. It's like when they would let him cook in games where they had to like play more up tempo, then he would smash. But in games where they were in control, they could run the football. Pete Carroll could just do whatever he wanted with Chris Carson and the running backs. Wilson just kind of fell to the wayside. He wasn't good enough. So I think that I think we'll see more of the peaks for Wilson in Denver, just based on, projected game environments against some of the tougher teams in the AFC West, a new coaching staff that I think is going to embrace a little bit more of the offensive philosophy of Russell Wilson. I mean, you don't go out and trade for this guy and then like hand the ball off. Like, I just think that would be a very poor allocation of resources. But at the end of the day, I think that we're going to see him kind of fall into the QB9 back end QB1 range, where I don't see a QB quarterback one outcome. I don't see a top 5 outcome really either, unless he just has an outlandish like touchdown rate where, I mean, that's possible because Russell Wilson has been one of the most efficient receivers or quarterbacks in NFL history. So I think he's kind of going, in that Stafford tier. And that's kind of what I would expect from him in Denver.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's definitely a very fair expectation, for him in Denver. I'm not going to be drafting him much right now. I mean, he's going as the QB10. And like, I just don't think he has the same ceiling that like he once did anymore, because again, he's got those age 34 legs. I know he's not, doesn't mean, I know age 34 is not that old, especially in today's NFL, but I just don't think the rushing will be there. And while, the situation is improving with the coaches, the coaching staff, the game plan probably around Russell Wilson, like, I just don't think that, as much as I think Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are going to be great this year, I think they're both undervalued for fantasy. I just don't think they're the same talents that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are. And, Albert O, I think, will be solid, and they have a great run game and a better offensive line than the Seahawks did. But, overall, I just don't see the case where Russell Wilson ends up as like a top 3 QB. And, maybe, shame on me for not wanting to just draft someone steady, but I really want to draft QBs that have, top 3 in their range of outcomes. And I just don't think that Russell Wilson has that. Do you think in a perfect world, if you're Cortland Sutton, goes off for 20 touchdowns or something crazy, that it happens? Or do you think that it's unlikely that he gets into the top 3 range?
Well, no, I mean, Stafford didn't get into the top 3 range last year, and he had Cooper
Yeah,
Kupp. Like,
good
so
point.
I think that a way to approach this is, this was brought up by Sean Connor on the Fantasy Pros podcast when he came on from the Action Network, and he talked about how there are ways to get exposure to certain offenses and players without actually drafting them.
Sure.
So in the case of like Jalen Hurts, he was like, you're talking about like AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts. He's like, you know what? Like AJ Brown's kind of expensive. Like I probably won't draft him, but I'll draft Jalen Hurts. So that way, like you're getting access to AJ Brown still, but you're not actually putting the capital behind him. It's like, I'll take Devontae Smith later. I still have, so when AJ Brown still scores a touchdown, like it's still benefiting you because you have Hurts. So I think it's the reverse case with Russell Wilson, where it's like, okay, I'm okay with not drafting Russell Wilson as quarterback 10, but I'm damn sure going to draft his wide receivers. So every time Russ has those big games, I'm going to have his receivers. So I think that's probably, and that's something you should think about, your listeners should think about as like kind of honing in on, especially with rushing quarterbacks. Like you want their quarterback. Maybe you don't go over aggressive on the receivers and like vice versa. So the more pocket passers, like a Russell Wilson, like a Brady, you want to be hyper aggressive targeting those receivers.
Agree, 100%. That's an amazing, amazing way to put it. That's why we bring you on the podcast, to give great tidbits like that. But I agree. I will have a lot of exposure to Jerry Jeudy and especially Cortland Sutton. Cecil Lammey, also a coworker of mine at the Football Guy, said that, he's a Denver beat reporter, and he said Cortland Sutton is Russell Wilson's guy. It's not Jerry Jeudy. It's Cortland Sutton season,
Music
baby.
to my ears, baby. Let's
Music
go.
to my ears. Music to our ears. I hope it happens. I have a lot of exposure to those guys, not as much to Russell Wilson. But what about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers offense? Are you going to have any exposure, to those wideouts? I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the QB 12 right now. And outside of the 2 years that he's gotten hurt, he's been in the top 9 fantasy QBs in 11 out of 11 seasons. 11 out of 11. Top 9 every single year. 7th or better in 10 out of 11 years. He's had 7 top 2 finishes, but there's no Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson ain't walking through that door. Devontae Adams ain't walking through that door. This is probably the worst pass catcher he's ever had in his career, arguably. And, I'm a little bit concerned for Aaron Rodgers. And, maybe again, I'm going back to the ceiling argument where I just don't see how he finishes really high with Christian Watson and Allen Lazard and, Randall Cobb. And, those guys I think could be undervalued in their own right. One of those guys I think is going to be a really big value in fantasy this year, and I don't know who it's going to be, but I think one of those guys, and again, it's probably the same thing where I'll have exposure to this Packers offense, but just not as much to Aaron Rodgers because I don't like what his, range of outcomes looks like this year. Are you feeling differently than I am?
No, I think that Aaron Rodgers is a full fade. Like where's why am I enticed to draft him? He's not going to run. He's going to throw less touchdowns than he did last year, and that's what you're hoping for. And the Packers are not an offense that, unlike the Buccaneers, they don't throw the piss out of the ball. They are pretty. If anything, they're probably going to be more run heavy than pass heavy. Now, I don't want to get down the weeds with that because it can change based on game script, but I don't think they're going to be this top 5 passing offense. If anything, they'll probably just be kind of middle of the road in terms of a run pass ratio. And look, Rodgers and Adams have combined for 64 touchdowns since 2016. That's double digits on average. So every year, it's double digit touchdowns for Devontae Adams. So it's you just lock it in. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. I think they're going to kind of spread the ball out between the different playmakers that they have on offense. And sure, Rodgers will have big weeks, but it's okay, you drafted a quarterback 12 and then he finishes QB 9, like you had mentioned, kind of where he's always finished. Okay, what does that do for you? I think that the idea of beating ADP somewhat gets lost, and it's I'd rather take a guy quarterback at QB 12 that has a chance to be a top 5 quarterback or just flame out entirely, because then I can just move on and draft somebody else, or I can pick up someone else off the waiver wire. Whereas Rodgers, if you draft him, you're not dropping Rodgers. You're not gonna drop him because of the name brand. You won't drop him, and they're gonna be stuck with him. You're gonna get middling production every single week. And I think again, another good exercise to think about is roster management. You remember in these redraft leagues, you own these guys. So if you draft Rodgers, you're probably I'm not gonna draft another quarterback. So I'm gonna stick and play Rodgers every week. And then if Rodgers keeps putting up these so-so games, you're all right, do I go to the waiver wire now? Now I have to roster 2 quarterbacks. It's just a pain in the ass where you're I'd rather just take a flyer on, a second-year quarterback, see if he hits. If he doesn't, all right, get rid of him and try to find somebody else. But Rodgers won't be that because he won't be so bad that you can just flat out cut him, but not good enough to move the needle. So yeah, I'm out on Rodgers at QB 12.
No, I also am. And again, for every reason that you pointed out, I don't think you need to say much more. Just again, I'll be drafting some other guys in the offense. I'll have my shares of Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon and some of the other guys. Just Rodgers specifically because of the name brand and the fact that it would be painful or almost hurtful, as much as I don't like him as a real life player, to drop him to the waiver wire. It's not happening. So I'm with you. But the next player is someone that I've probably talked about as much as any player on the podcast. So I'm not going to actually lead this one off like I have been. I'm just going to throw it to you. I'll say his name and I'll just let you say what you have to say because people have heard enough from me about him. But it's Trey Lance. You have Jalen Hurts, ranked as your QB3 right now. I'm curious to see if you also have Trey Lance ranked a lot higher than consensus. I don't know who. I'm sorry. I don't want to disrespect anyone that is in the FantasyPros rankings competition. But Trey Lance at QB 15 in ECR is just criminal. I mean, Derek Carr is ahead of Trey Lance right now. That doesn't make sense to me. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. How do you feel about Trey Lance? Don't tell me you're one of those people that has Derek Carr above him.
No, I don't have Derek Carr above Trey Lance. I shoot for upside at the quarterback position in one quarterback leagues at least. So I value it a little bit more. I have Trey Lance at number 10. So he's
Okay.
a top 10 quarterback for me. And I think that suggests to whoever follows my rankings that you should be drafting Trey Lance because you should be. Because it's the kind of the same debate. Rodgers probably has a better median projection than Trey Lance in terms of like he's way safer. And like in a two quarterback league, I could see Rodgers being a much
Sure.
safer asset. But with Trey Lance, it's like that's the exact guy I want because he's either going to be like QB1 or top five quarterback or just like flame out entirely. Like you're not going to get like middling production from Trey Lance. He's either going to smash or like be a train wreck. So like, but that's what I'm willing to. That's what I want make my bet on. And I'm betting on him in the rushing that he showed last year. I mean, the guy was rushing for like 60 yards per game in the 3 games that he had played more than a 50% snap share. He only started 2 games, but in those games, he was over 22 expected fantasy points. Like, I don't know what else we need to see necessarily. Obviously, we want to see him take another step forward, but he didn't play a lot of football his last year in the college ranks, and he played a little bit last year, but he clearly wasn't ready. But we knew that he wasn't ready coming out. Like he was a raw prospect, and Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't playing bad enough, at least in the win-loss column, for them to just flat out bench Garoppolo when it was clear that Trey Lance kind of was the next guy. Kind of reminds me a little bit like the Mahomes situation as a rookie where he didn't play because Alex Smith was like good enough. And last year, Jimmy Garoppolo was good enough. They didn't have to give it to Lance. And he was up and down, but he still flashed. And I just think that people are being too hesitant and too afraid to buy into Trey Lance when it's like it's so clear that his path to being a monster is heir apparent. And it's just the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't gotten traded yet because he got shoulder surgery. Of course, no one's going to trade for a guy with a bum shoulder. Once he's deemed healthy, he's gone. Like I have no doubt in my mind that he's gone. So I'm buying the dip on Lance right now because in a few months from now, he's going to be ripping up big plays in the preseason, and we're all going to be like, wow, remember when Trey Lance was like quarterback 15 ECR? Yeah, that was fun. So, yeah, I'm buying Trey Lance.
Well, I think the other part of it that, a one point that I have not, mentioned about Trey Lance, of all the things I've said about him, is the fact that, okay, like let's talk about it just for a second. Like let's off a couple rushing quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. Trey Lance has the best weapons out of all of those guys, in my opinion. He also probably has arguably the best offensive line out of all those guys. Like Jalen Hurts is 3rd and 4th leading target getters. Last year were Quez Watkins and Jalen Reagor. Like in the third option for Trey Lance this year is going to be like Brandon Ayuk and Danny Gray. Like it's crazy. I think that he could be what Jalen Hurts was potentially in year 2, just on steroids, just because of how good the weapons are already. So if he's even somewhat competent as a passer, like he's going to be insane for fantasy, especially with the rushing upside and the fact that in that small sample size of 3 starts, he averaged over 10 rush attempts, per game. It's crazy with Trey Lance. I won't say anything else on him because I know people are tired of it, but Trey Lance is the man. Do not draft him over Derek Carr. But Derek Carr is also someone that's really interesting because, again, Derek Carr, was the QB 14. They added Devontae Adams. But here's a really weird stat about Derek Carr. Derek Carr's played 8 seasons in the NFL. He's been between QB 13 and QB 20 in all 8 seasons. He's never finished inside the top 12, but he's never finished outside the top 20. He's been consistent every single year. He's gone up the last 4 years from QB 20 to 17, 14, and 13. 13 was his best finished ever. And, he's been consistent, but I think he has big upside, especially with a coaching upgrade with Josh McDaniels. I think he's better than, any other coach that Derek Carr has played under. But then you also add in the best wide receiver in the NFL in Devontae Adams, who's still in his prime and was still amazing last year. And then Hunter Renfro's going into his 3rd year now. And I think Hunter Renfro is also really, really good. And then you have someone like Darren Waller. I mean, that's a really, really great big 3. They have an excellent run game with Josh Jacobs, and they have one of the best play callers in the NFL with Josh McDaniels. So do you think that, Derek Carr has some hidden upside people aren't talking about? Or do you think that, he's just going to be the same guy he always was, maybe top 10 QB at the very bottom at best?
Well, when it comes to the guys like the pocket passers, like a Derek Carr, it's all about touchdowns. Like that's what he has to do. He has to have the outlier touchdown season. And I mean, if he's ever going to have it, like you mentioned, like he hasn't done it up to this point, but if he's ever going to do it, it would be this year when he has Devontae Adams. Like because he's never had an absolute red zone monster like Adams is, like I mentioned before when talking about him and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Derek Carr last year he never finished as a top 8 quarterback last year. Like
Yep.
never, despite all like great passing numbers, and it just never happened for him. But now you have Devontae Adams in the fold. So I think with touchdowns though, touchdowns tend to be flukier. So I don't think it's going to be a every single week Carr is going to be like, oh, he's going to be top 5 quarterback every single week. No, I think that he'll have these big games, especially when they're playing the AFC West, where it's like, oh man, like Carr, like in DFS will be someone like, oh, I think Carr is going to have like a monster game this week. It's going to be some peaks and valleys, but you look at his touchdown rate last year was 3.7, which was actually below his career average.
Wow.
23 passing touchdowns were 7 below expectation. So when you're looking at guys looking to regress in terms of regression in the positive, like Derek Carr is like a screaming candidate. Like I would not surprise me at all. Like through 23 touchdowns last year, like he honestly should probably throw like 35 this year. Like no doubt in my mind that he's going to be at least 30 because that's what he should have been at last year. But
Yep.
him and Waller were not on the same page all the time. Hunter Renfrow, they weren't always connecting in the end zone. And now, how do you fix that problem? It's like when you're looking for a reason for things to regress positively, like Devontae Adams is the positive regression coming to the Raiders offense. Like that is the form of positive regression. So I think that 30 touchdowns, like 35 touchdowns is well within his range of outcomes. If you look at last year, every quarterback that threw for at least 30 touchdowns finished inside the top 10. So
Wow.
I think Derek Carr is definitely going to be a back end top 10 quarterback this season.
Wow. How about that? How about that? This is the best part about fantasy season where there's like 16 or 17 top 10 QBs. There's like 19 and a half top 10 running backs. Like but again, there's a case for everybody. And it's interesting to kind of sort through those cases and try to find what guys are truly going to be in your top 10. But we have 2 guys left to talk about today, and we're going to start with Justin Fields in that one. Justin Fields is I think maybe a poor man's Jalen Hurts, last year with the not great weapons that has the rushing upside in year 2. I mean, Justin Fields averaged 7.4 rush attempts per game over his last 7 starts last year once he started to get comfortable, but his passing numbers just weren't good. He's the QB 17 right now. And, last year he was 33rd in true completion percentage. He was 29th under pressure, 29th in clean pocket, all stats per player profiler. I mean, Justin Fields isn't the greatest passer. He also doesn't have the greatest weapons. I mean, Allen Robinson, who wasn't good, is gone. It's going to be the Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet show, which is interesting in itself. And I like those guys. But again, when Byron Pringle could be the 3rd most targeted player in an offense and Cole Kmet is the 2nd most targeted player in an offense, I'm just not sure how I feel. But the rushing upside is there. I mean, what say you about Justin Fields?
Well, let me ask you something. So the year that Lamar Jackson won MVP, who were his 2 top weapons?
Oh, Mark
Who are they?
Andrews and Hollywood
A
Brown.
tight end and a rookie wide receiver. Okay. So
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. Like I know you mentioned that the weapons aren't great, but it's like I don't think that they're as bad as people are. Like, what do they want them to do? Like, okay, they drafted Velus Jones. Like, no one was like thrilled about the pick, but he's still a wide receiver. Like,
yep,
he's still a guy that is fat. Like,
yep.
if they had drafted, Sky Moore instead or some other receiver, like, would it be so much better? Like, oh, well, now he has great weapons. It's like, look, like Velus Jones, yeah, I don't expect him to be really anything, but the fact that he is older, like, it at least means he should have a slow learning curve and can probably produce sooner rather than later. Like, his ceiling is like super low because he basically took forever to break out at the college level, so he has very limited in that capacity. But the fact that he could hit the ground running because he's more experienced, like, okay, I could buy that. And same thing with Byron Pringle. He's familiar with the system coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs. So I don't think that the weapons are really something I'm afraid of. And I'm going back to the rushing. And I'm going back to the fact that Justin Fields is actually good. Like,
Yeah.
people are like falling over Zach Wilson because they're like, oh, I need this guy, like all the weapons. It's like, dude, if Justin Fields was on the Jets, dude, he would be
Yeah.
so locked and loaded to just explode this year. Like, he would be, I don't even know how high I would have ranked Justin Fields. Like, he would be just ranked so high for me. But I think Fields showed last year. I mean, he was a top 12 quarterback in his last 4 games that he started fully healthy. He was rushing over 35 yards per game. If you look at quarterbacks in their second year, or as rookies that rushed as much as Fields did in his year, it was Cam Newton, Josh Allen, and RG3. And
Wow.
2 of those guys finished as top 6 quarterbacks their second season, and RG3 finished as a top 12 quarterback in points per game before he got hurt. So, I mean, that's who you're looking at. Like, Justin Fields' rookie year was like Cam Newton like Josh Allen, like RG3 from a rushing perspective. And there's no reason to think behind that offensive line that that's going to stop at any time soon. He's going to have to run a ton in this offense. So for me, I think that Justin Fields, it's going to take 1 week. 1 week, but he's going to be ranked outside. I guarantee he'll be ranked outside the top 12 ECR quarterbacks for week 1 against the 49ers. The rhetoric will be, oh no, this 49ers defensive line is going to destroy the Bears. It's going to be a mess for Justin Fields. Justin Fields rushed for 100 yards against the 49ers last season. 100 yards.
Crazy.
And honestly, bold take, he'll do it again. Week 1, Justin Fields. Over 100 rushing yards. Your DFS Millie Maker lineup quarterback will be Justin Fields.
Interesting. We'll have to clip this and put it out and hand you at least half of the million for the listener that put it in the lineup and won the Millie. So I love that. But would you be taking some Justin Fields over someone like Tua, who's going after him in ECR at QB 18? I mean, Tua is very interesting, especially with his accuracy last year was pretty impressive, in certain metrics. Like he was first in deep ball completion percentage, first in red zone completion percentage. He got a good upgrade at offensive line. And then you add in someone like Tyreek Hill. And it's the same thing that we were talking about, with Jalen Hurts and the years thing and how much players get better. Like Tua's going to his 3rd year. He's going to be a lot better than he probably was in year 2. They have Tyreek Hill, and you add him into the offense, and adding Tyreek Hill into any offense automatically makes a quarterback a lot better. But not only that, but they have other guys like, Mike Gesicki, is going into his next year, and he's still ascending. Jalen Waddle, who is amazing as a rookie, is going into his 2nd year and might face less coverage, without Tyreek Hill there. I mean, Devontae Parker is gone. Boo-hoo. The crowd, is so upset. But Tyreek Hill, is going to really help this offense, and Tua could be really interesting. So who do you have, or who are you drafting right now between Justin Fields and Tua?
I'm drafting Justin Fields.
Okay.
Tua. I don't think it's particularly close. I think that Fields is clearly the more rushing quarterback of the two guys.
Yep.
And I mean, look, the reason that Tua's accuracy is so good last year is because half the time he's just checking the ball down. He had extremely low average depth of target, and I think that deep ball stats can tend to be a little bit noisy because it comes on a limited sample size. Like you don't need to pull up the numbers, but I know that Tua did not rank extremely high in terms of deep ball rate, which is why his efficiency numbers look better than they are. And I think that a better tell of how good a deep ball quarterback is, if you're good at something, you do it a lot. So why are they holding him back? And I fell in this trap last year with Daniel Jones. Like Daniel Jones on a per attempt basis was like, oh man, like this guy was like the #1 passer rating on throws 20 yards downfield. I was like, oh, this is sick. Like he got Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay's like a downfield savant. Like this is a perfect fit. And it's like, oh wait, duh. The reason they weren't throwing the ball downfield is because it's not something that it's really not his strong suit, and he's afraid to kind of put it into tight windows. And that's how I feel about Tua. Like I feel like he's really not a quarterback that's going to be able to put it into tight windows. I feel like he's a win with quarterback, not win because quarterback. And that's how he was at Alabama. Like he's always been kind of supplemented up by those around him. And yes, is that going to mean he's going to have good weeks here and there? Yeah. But I just see a lot of like Jimmy Garoppolo in that type of analysis where Jimmy Garoppolo, like why wasn't he better in fantasy? He had plenty of weapons. You just said yourself, Trey Lance had better weapons than all those other quarterbacks. Like Jimmy Garoppolo had those same exact weapons and the same exact offensive line. And yet he could not be relied on at all for fantasy football. And that's kind of how I feel about Tua.
Wow. I was going to say, I was pretty sure it was you that we've had a number of conversations where you always bring up Jimmy Garoppolo anytime Tua's name is mentioned. So I'm with you. I am drafting Justin Fields over Tua, but I'm a little bit more optimistic on Tua being better than Jimmy Garoppolo than you are. But again, I think those are really interesting, and I'm hoping for Tua, as much crap as he's gotten from the media, and every time he throws an airhead deep ball or something like that, people tear him to shreds. So with how much scrutiny he's faced, I'm rooting for him. But
let me ask you. So one last thing on Tua. So and this is kind of like hitting on. So I do a lot of. So I make sure I always look at with quarterbacks. I look at the schedule at least early on because I want to know if I'm drafting this guy. Like, can I start him week 1? Like, does he have a good matchup? And the Dolphins' schedule opens up as the following: Patriots, Ravens, Bills. Is that good?
No.
Like I mean, because if you draft Tua as like your late run quarterback, you have to start him week 1. They're at home, but they're playing the Patriots, and then they play the Ravens, and then they play the Bills.
That's not good.
So it's like in that itself, it's like that's why I'm not going to draft him because it's like, especially if Tua doesn't start the season like good, oh my god, like it's going to be like the the media is going to be like restless for him.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that could tank his value. And it's a lot to ask for Tua. And this is kind of where I partially feel bad for the guy. It's like, especially him and the new head coach, it's like there are so many moving pieces with this offense that to expect them to just like hit the ground running week 1 against Bill Belichick, like that's a lot to ask for. So that's kind of why another concern I have for Tua, just like looking at, it's like, if I don't have any confidence starting him against the Patriots in week 1, it's like, then why am I drafting this guy? So, whereas
100%.
Trey Lance gets the Bears. So,
yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And that is a great way to segue out of it. This is the first episode I think I've done all season where there's no flag plant because you previously, gave your flag plant on the last episode. But Andrew, always a pleasure to have you on the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. Before we go, you're doing a lot of great stuff, a lot of great articles coming out, like the Andrew Erickson's Target articles. I hope you get to mention that here. Please, before we go, plug anything that you want where you can check out all your amazing work.
Yep. So I'm at Andrew Erickson _ on Twitter. Same thing on TikTok. All my articles and content can be found over on Fantasy Pros. I'm on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Joe Pisapia and D-Bro. So we have a lot of fun there, chalking it up, talking about fantasy. We'll have to get you on the show soon, Alex, because it's awesome. It's a fun time, man. And we just talk game, talk about fantasy. Look, man, it's crazy that it's already June. And I just like the season's coming up. Like it's coming. Like soon it's going to be training camp. We're going to get even more hype videos, these one-handed catches. Oh, dude, cannot wait. It happens every year too. I always feel like I'm more prepared every single offseason. I don't know why. Because I don't think that I'm doing like more work, but I don't know. I think that you're just getting in more reps. And I think every year I try to hone in my craft and really look back at, what mistakes I did last year, what didn't work. And it's nice because I have so much content now that I can look back and see all of my misses and be like, all right, why did I make this mistake? And why am I not going to make it again? So I'm looking forward to having a more accurate year in 2022 and learning from last year. And thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. And, you have to go and check out all that great stuff. And again, Cortland Sutton, Jalen Hurts, those definitely will not be misses. Those are going to be some big hits this year, barring health. Please, please, please let those guys be healthy because the results are going to be amazing. But speaking of amazing, how about you listeners listening to the Fresh Fantasy Podcast? This is not possible without you guys, and I'm so thankful for all the listeners every single day. And also, I can't give it away. It'll be on the next episode after this one. We will be doing our first ever jersey giveaway on the podcast. Stay tuned for that. Keep in mind on the next episode. But as always, please leave a review. You guys already know what to do. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.